Good morning. Welcome. I'm Mark Peacock, Chief Marketing and Communication Officer at Linkspring. Welcome again to this, our second in a webinar series entitled Linkspring Presents. Today, we're going to dive into a brief discussion about thermostats. A couple housekeeping items. Yes, we are recording, and this will be made available on Linkspring's YouTube channel. And we'll send a link to everybody at the conclusion of the webinar, probably tomorrow. And if you have any questions, please use the chat function within the platform we're viewing on. So I am delighted, I'm extremely delighted today to have Matt Krieger, who is the OEM Business Development Manager from Viconics. Viconics was founded 30 years ago and has been a Linkspring ancillary products partner since 2006. And many of you already know who Viconics is. They are an industry, what I call a stat and device leader, through their ability and their capabilities to create innovative products, improve energy savings and occupant comfort, with a focus on providing their customers lower installed cost, improved return on investment, and accelerated paybacks. Matt will provide an overview of Viconics' latest products and available through Linkspring and offer some of his insight into the market. I'll get us started with a few points and a few observations. Next slide, please. The continuous development in technology and rapid innovation in devices, along with new requirements, has increased customers' interest in the use of thermostats, in particular smart thermostats. Controlling temperature, humidity, and airflow is the major contributor to creating and maintaining a healthy environment, occupant satisfaction, and cost control. These functions are important aspects for every facility operation today, as they directly affect productivity, the workplace experience, and building efficiency and performance. When we look at thermostats, they are continuing to advance and bring all new capabilities to HVAC and building control systems. In addition to controllers, thermostats have advanced their feature sets, their functions, and their smart capabilities exponentially and are changing the way we manage and operate buildings. So much so that the thermostat segment is projected to register its highest growth rate from this year through 2026. Next slide, please. So if we look at some of the drivers that are driving today's thermostat market, it is the renewed focus on energy, carbon reduction, efficiency, and so forth. Several of the pending and current new government regulations, innovations by thermostat people such as Viconics, such as self-learning, expanded wireless options, and upgrades to existing systems and existing buildings. Next slide. So in summary, thermostats serve a great purpose in our buildings and facilities. They are creating new efficiencies that positively impact how buildings and facilities are managed and operated. They offer clear value and are leading us to evolve new practices for using them to enhance building performance and efficiency, occupant wellness, and meet compliant requirements and manage overall risk. With that, I want to go ahead and turn it over to Matt. And Matt, take the stage, please.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about our controllers. I guess we'll start off with the main screen here. Hopefully I can get to it. I don't see the screen here.
We'll get you there. Angela, you want to see if you can take control and go ahead and see if we can get that. A little technical difficulty. Let's see. Apologies, hold on.
I have a choice here to show my screen. I could just do that.
Yeah, go ahead, please do.
All right. So let's see
There
if
you
this
go.
will
There you go.
this will work out here. Put it in presentation mode here. And I hope you don't see that in the corner there. Okay, well, so what we're going to talk about today is our control line, our 8000 series room controllers. I don't know if you're familiar with Viconics for those out in the audience, but Viconics is a manufacturer of room controllers, basically thermostats. We had our previous series followed by the 7000 series communicating, thermostats, BACnet, LAN, those devices, and they've kind of evolved into the 8000 series room controllers, which we're really going to talk about today. First of all, we'll take a look at what is actually an 8000 series controllers. What they are is basically a thermostat, but they're more than that. They're kind of like a DDC controller on the wall with the sensors built in and a color touchscreen interface. Depending upon which model you choose, they have a configurable sequence of operations. So there's a model for rooftops and heat pumps. There's a model for fan coil units. There's a model for zone control. There's a model for VAV box control, either pressure dependent or pressure independent. There's a model for line voltage fan coil units. But each one of them have a sequence of operations that's built in, and you configure it in order to come up with the correct inputs and outputs to match your piece of equipment. On the device itself, it's got a humidity sensor. It's got a temperature sensor. It has a light level sensor, so the screen will dim down when the room gets dark, and it also can have a built-in occupancy sensor. Along with that are 7 universal inputs that are configurable, as well as 9 outputs. 5 of them are binary and 4 of them are universal. So it's quite a powerful little controller, all in one little package. Again, about the size of a thermostat, right? These also have multiple communication protocols that can be utilized. On board is BACnet, MSTP, or Modbus. You can toggle between the two of them. You could add a device that will add Zigbee Pro wireless communications, or you can have Zigbee Pro wireless built into the device itself, or you can add a card for Wi-Fi communications. If you choose not to have a communication protocol, not part of a network, they do have a time clock and schedule built into them. All of the configuration is done through the user interface, through that color touchscreen interface. So essentially there's no programming tools, there's no software required to do this. You can basically take it out of the box, configure it for the piece of equipment, and you're off and running. Nice part about these controllers as well is there's no licensing fees, there's no subscription services. So what you pay for is what you get, and you don't have to add on anything else in order to make the controllers, a functional piece of equipment as a standalone device or as part of a DDC system. The controllers themselves also support the capability to add up to 20 wireless sensors that can communicate via Zigbee Pro wireless to the 8000 series controller. So you could add occupancy sensors, you could add a door contact, a window contact, water leak detectors, or a remote temperature, humidity, CO2 sensor. Those are all battery-powered devices. There's anywhere from 5 to 10 years of battery life, depending upon which sensor is chosen. And you can utilize these as a standalone. Hey, you know what? I don't have a network here, but I just want to talk to wireless sensors. You can do it as part of a wired system. So I have a BACnet MSTP wired system there. I can add those sensors there, or I can work in a fully wireless network where I'm using full Zigbee Pro wireless or Wi-Fi to communicate. So not only can you, use the humidity sensor, temperature sensor, occupant sensor that could be built into the controller, but then again, you can add up to 20 of those additional devices if you wanted to do multiple windows, multiple doors, multiple temperature sensors to average or do a high-low signal select, put in a water leak detector if there's any water to send an alarm. So there's many uses for these, and the nice part again is that you can add up to 20 of these sensors per controller. There's 2 varieties of these controllers. There's either the Schneider Electric version or the Viconic styles. On the top here, you'll see the Schneider Electric versions. They come in a white case with a white fascia or a silver case with a silver fascia. If you want, there's alternate fascias that you can purchase and put them over. So maybe someone for aesthetic purposes wants the silver case but wants a black fascia on there. So it's multiple design opportunities there available for to meet the decor or the aesthetic purposes of whatever room they're in. The bottom one there is on the left is the Viconics version. That's always a white case and fascia, one piece, no logo, and it fits for any environment, right? You're capable with the controller through the configuration screens to pick any one of the color screens you see there. So there's white, green, blue, gray, dark gray, black, red, orange, all different colors, purple for those blue. You can change those just from the face of the controller. I often questioned why, they have so many different colors. Well, one reason is for aesthetic purposes, but some people have the face of the screen change based upon the mode. If I'm in heating mode, it's red. If I'm in cooling mode, it's blue, to fit that particular kind of application. Likewise, over here on the right part of the screen, another configurable option is what do you want to show on the screen, right? So you can have in all the buttons available and change the mode, heat, cool, auto, off, change the fan, low, mediums, high, auto, degrees C, degrees F toggle button. And it's a language button. The controllers support 20 different languages. So if you put it into a dorm room situation or a hospitality situation and the person in the room speaks Spanish or speaks French, they can toggle to have that language show up. Likewise, if you wanted to limit the user's access to certain things, oh, you know what, I want to take away their ability to change the mode from heat to cool and auto, but I still want to have them, be able to adjust the set point. So you can take, like in the top right box there, you can see the warmer cooler adjust, or the set point adjust is there, but all the other buttons are removed. Those are all configurations that can be chosen just from the face of the controller to meet whatever kind of application you want. In the bottom ones, you'll see maybe that that moon and star picture for times when the unit is unoccupied. Hey, I come in after hours, I can press that button and get occupied set points for whatever time period you design. So hopefully we've hit all of the different kind of configurations, with our standard selections for whatever use might be required for that space. It also supports a standby image, so you can load any image in there, and if you don't touch the screen for 2.5 minutes, that image pops up. There's line voltage varieties of these, as well as low voltage. Primarily all of them are low voltage, 24 volts, but we do have a fan coil unit controller that will do a line voltage. So perfect for any of those city type retrofits where line voltage is available and you want to upgrade the look of the thermostat on the wall of the controller, possibly put it in a network. You don't have to put an automatic transformer. You can still get away with a line voltage that's already there. The equipment that these guys are used on is typically package type equipment. So we're talking fan coils, rooftop units, heat pumps, for instance, right? So on the rooftop unit application, standard configuration is up to 2 stages of heat, 2 stages of cool or modulating heat. You can control the economizer on that, so you have a 0 to 10 volt out for an outdoor damper. It can do dehumidification. Each one of these controllers does have a humidity sensor on there. You can add configurable inputs like a dirty filter, fan proving, or general alarm inputs. And it also accommodates adding on an outdoor air sensor, supply air sensor, or a CO2 sensor if you want. For the fan coil operations, you could do 2 or 4 pipe, 3-speed or ECM fan motor, and you can configure the outputs. Hey, they're both on-off, floating, modulating, or do you have a combination? Hey, my heat is on-off, but my cooling is modulating. It can accommodate all those just through the configuration selections. It does do the same thing with dehumidification inputs like dirty filter and general alarm. You can put a changeover sensor on there if you have a 2-pipe system, 10K type 2 sensor, or maybe it's a contact closure. Open is heat, close is cool. You can configure all those things. And again, line voltage or low voltage is available for these. The RTU controller and the heat pump controller are basically the same. You configure, you choose at the face of the controller whether it's heat pump or whether it's rooftop. And if you choose heat pump, you can have up to 3 stages of heat, 2 stages of cool or modulating heat, the economizer, dehumidification, and all the inputs and outputs that are available with the rooftop application. So one controller does rooftop or heat pump, depending upon how you configure the device. These can also be used for zone control. So that if you have just a duct heater or maybe baseboard heat, it can do staged heat, modulating heat for zone damper control. hey, the damper opens to allow hot or cold air depending upon what's coming down the duct. You can put in a supply air temperature sensor and use it that way. Typically utilized for, again, things like zone damper control, cabinet unit heaters, radiant panels. There's also an option for these guys to do a VVT system, right? So I can have one controller control a rooftop unit and bypass or VFD, and then units for each one of the zones that get a vote. X number of votes causes the unit to create heat. The rooms that need heat, damper opens up. The rooms that don't need heat, damper closes down and then goes back to normal operation with just the fan. So you can do this as a rooftop unit application, or you can do it as a heat pump application. Again, controls the bypass damper or the variable speed drive. Modulating zone damper control on each one of them, and each one of the zones support duct heat or baseboard heat or both. This network can be either a wired system where I'm going BACnet MSTP from device to device. I could do a Zigbee Pro wireless network where I'm eliminating the daisy chain and utilizing a coordinator to be able to talk to all the Zigbee devices. Or I can also choose a Wi-Fi scenario where I put in a Wi-Fi router. All the communication goes up to the Wi-Fi router and then back down to the zones. So you have your choice of different communication protocols there. Recently, we've released a controller that does VAV boxes, either pressure independent or pressure dependent, right? So single duct VAV boxes, you can have a fan on those, or you can have, you can do no fan, or you can do a series fan, or you can do a parallel fan. It supports duct or baseboard heat or both. Modulating actuator on the damper actuator, and then input from a pressure transducer corresponding to the pressure range, and then an output to a modulating actuator. Again, you can incorporate the wireless sensors as well, temperature and humidity, CO2, occupancy sensors, door and window contacts, and leak detectors. And the cool part about this, in order to configure it, you don't need any software. There's no balancing tools. You do all the balancing from the face of the controller. So you don't have to climb above a ceiling level or get on a ladder to be able to connect to a controller. You do it all from the touchscreen interface, right? And these can be, again, standalone. They can be BACnet MSTP. They can be Modbus, or they can be Wi-Fi. So it's a great application for VAV box controls. We've also recently released a bundle, a kit, to make it a little bit easier. So it comes with the controller, the actuator, the pressure transducer, and the temperature sensor, right? And again, no software is required, no balancing tools are required. You get the actuator that fits the 0 to 10 volt or 2 to 10 volt output to that actuator, the pressure transducer that's a 0 to 1 inch range that fits with the controller itself, and then a 4-inch duct probe for supply air temperature sensing. Again, this makes it very easy to select, very easy to install. When you service it, if something goes bad, then you can replace each one of the individual components as opposed to replacing a complete VAV box controller. So you can replace just the pressure transducer, just the actuator, just the temperature sensor. I mentioned a couple times that these are configurable devices. How do you configure them? Basically, you touch and hold at the top center part of the screen, and it takes you to 2 pages of setup. Each one of those setups has menus for whatever function you're trying to set up. So network functionality sets up for the BACnet MSTP, the Modbus, the Wi-Fi, or the Zigbee communication protocol. Configuration is where you'd go to change, whether it's a rooftop unit or a heat pump, whether it's staged heat or modulating heat, whether it's a 2-pipe or a 4-pipe, type of a fan coil unit, whether it's a pressure dependent or pressure independent type controller. The set points functionality does all the set points: occupied, unoccupied, standby set points. Display is for all those things in the display: background color, what buttons you want to show up, how you want that the arrangement to be shown on the screen. Service view and test outputs are nice because service view shows everything that's going inside of the controller, where the heating PI is, where the cooling PI is, what is on and what is off, so that you can, basically interrogate the controller and not have to use any software or any commissioning tools to be able to do it. It's all right there in front of you at your fingertips. The test output screen allows you to toggle the inputs or toggle the outputs on and off, or modulate them from 0 volts to 10 volts DC. So if you wanted to verify that I've wired the device correctly, you can, instead of trying to fake out the controller, raise up the set point so that the heat comes on, or lower the set point so the cool comes on, you can just go to the test output screen and say, I'm turning on heat or modulating heat. I'm turning on the cooling on and off. I'm turning the fan on, low, medium, high speed. Yes, I've configured those all correctly. So it's a great opportunity for any sort of commissioning or checkout procedure to verify that, you know, your electrician has wired them correctly or that they're operating correctly, from the get-go. Page 2 of setup allows you to choose what languages show up when you toggle between the languages. Clock and schedule allows you to put in the date and time of the device, as well as set up a 7-day schedule. And that can be 7 individual days. It could be 5 days, you know, Monday through Friday is the same and Saturday and Sunday are different, or 5 days are the same and the weekend is the same. So you got 7 days, 5, 1 and 1, or 5 and 2. Wireless tells you all the wireless devices that are connected up to it, all those sensors, what their network information is, what they're reading, whether or not it's open or closed, if it's a window or door contact, what the CO2 value is, those sort of things, so that you can take those and be apprised of what those are reading. The last part is a Lua, which is actually a programming language. So these controllers by themselves have a sequence of operations. You have no need to add any programming to them. But if you want, you can go through and alter what the inputs are, alter what the outputs are, change the sequence of operations, or add timers, do whatever it is that comes to mind. All you kind of stuck with is, am I using the 7 inputs and 9 outputs? You can't do any more than that, right? So the programming of this guy, again, the language is called Lua. The programming is text-based. So the software tool to write the programs is Notepad++, which is free on the internet. The programming language is called Lua, L-U-A. If you go to lua.org, it's a free programming language. So you don't have to pay anything for the software tools to create the programs or to write the programs. Typically what happens is we write the programs, provide them to you, you download them to the controller and test out the sequence of operations to verify that what you've changed or what you've requested to be changed is satisfactory, right? The software tool to download the programs is called the Uploader, VT8000 Uploader tool. That's also free on our website. So you can download that on your computer. And what you can do with that is you can load a Lua program into it to change the sequence of operations or change the inputs and outputs, to load the standby images. You can upgrade firmware with this tool. So if we come up with a bug fix or if we add features to the controller, there's no need to replace the controller. You can just upgrade the firmware on there, right? You can take, and if you've got a large installation, let's say a hotel or a dorm room where each one of the devices are configured exactly the same, you can save that configuration, plug into the next controller, download that configuration so it's set up exactly the same way that the previous one was. Again, this is a uploader tool that's free on our website, or if you have access to the Schneider Exchange, you can get that tool as well. In order to be able to put those programs into the controllers, it's a USB to micro USB cable. You probably already have one from some other electronic device. You plug it in your computer, you plug it at the other end into the controller, and you're able to do those modifications. Again, some thoughts, for things that are get modified. Let's say you had a rooftop unit or a air handling unit that had 4 stages of heat and 4 stages of cool. Well, there's 8 outputs there, and a fan output, that's the 9th output. So I can take any of my unused outputs that I'm not using for something else and use those for that operation. So a 4 heat, 4 cool is a program that we already have. Let's say you wanted modulating heat and modulating cool for a rooftop unit or air handling unit. That's a program that you can add. You want a pressure transducer input and output to a variable speed drive for the rooftop unit, no problem, that program's already done. Maybe you got fan coil units that are more like, unit ventilators, and you need outdoor damper control. That's already done. Oh, guess what? Maybe somebody only wants low fan and heating in heating mode for a fan coil unit. That can be done, right? We've done multi-sensor averaging of all those to pick the high-low signal selector average, done a hot deck, cold deck applications, or even taken this controller and made it a lighting control for, 4 stages of lighting, right, to be able to do that. So basically, like I said, it's a DDC controller, essentially, but it has a sequence of operations that you can modify. So what makes these controllers so great? First of all, I think they look really well on the wall, right? You've got your 2 varieties, the Schneider Electric version or the Viconics version. They're actually DDC controllers on the wall that look like a thermostat. So they have all the inputs, all the outputs, all the communication protocols right in that box on the wall, right? There's customizable designs of colors and languages, right? So I can change the background color. I can change what buttons show up on the screen. I can change what languages people can toggle through. And I can also provide the look, right? Whether it be the Schneider Electric look, the silver and the different color fascias, or the Viconics white version. As I mentioned, you can also put in standby images. Here, when nobody touches the screen for 2.5 minutes, you can put in any bitmap image that you want to show up on the screen. Typically, it's a logo of a company, a picture of the building, a school mascot, whatever the case might be. In order to get rid of that screen, you just touch the screen and it goes back to the standard screen with the temperatures, that's on it. It's got 2 password protection levels. So one password protection level would be if I press and hold at the top part of the screen to get to the configuration pages, you can password protect that one so nobody can go in and change the configurations that you've made. The second one is a user password, so that if anybody wanted to change, say, the mode of the controller or change the set point, they can put in a password and they have access to that. And like I said, too, with the display options, maybe you want to remove some of those functions. So you can password protect and you can remove those functions from the color touchscreen. Finally, you can also add BACnet short messaging if you're part of a BACnet network or with a Lua program. So like in the controller you see on the right-hand side of the screen where it says room 1705 at the bottom, that's where all the messages show up for like no fan proving switch, frost protection. You can also make that writable device. So like, for instance, if somebody would check into a hotel room, you could put in welcome Mr. Peacock in that area right there. You can also do long BACnet messages. That would be like in the bottom left-hand screen there. Seattle Schools uses it for warning, shelter in place, intruder in building, and it flashes 2 different colors. So you have either the short BACnet message on the bottom part of the screen or the long BACnet message, which takes up the whole screen itself. Where do you find these controllers? Elementary schools, primary schools, universities, residence halls, retail establishments, hotels and healthcare facilities, and office buildings. Basically anywhere you find package type equipment. There's also an aspect to these controllers that we use for energy savings, right? Energy savings is a big deal these days, and we try to build that into each one of these controllers. Each one of them have a heating PID and a cooling PID, so that you know where you are within that spectrum. So you don't have to go full heating or full cooling if you have modulating outputs. The PI controller in each one of them operates over time, so the longer it gets to work, the closer it hones in on the set point. And so you can be assured of that control. The same PID loop has been used in our 7000 series controllers as the 8000 series controllers. So you have that capability over time to be able to get closer to set point as time goes on. You can have a built-in occupancy sensor in. You can hardwire an occupancy sensor, or you can use the wireless ones for occupancy. Why control to the occupied set point when there's nobody in the room, right? So you can have those. And when you have that occupancy option available to you, it has 3 levels of set point, and that's kind of shown up in the upper right hand corner here. When there's motion in the room, I control to occupied set points. If I don't sense motion, it starts a timer, right? After a half an hour, let's say, you can go to the standby set points. In this example here, I go from my 70 and 72 to 75 and 67. So maybe there's a conference room or something like that where I don't want to go all the way to unoccupied set points. I just want to go to a standby set point, so I'm not heating or cooling, but when somebody comes back in the room, they don't have to heat up or cool down from the unoccupied set points. So you've got the occupied set points, you've got the standby set points, but then you also have the unoccupied set points. If I don't sense motion for a longer period of time, I can go to my unoccupied set points and control to those. So energy savings is built in. You can also add door or window sensors, right? So either that can be hardwired to the controller, or you can use the wireless sensors. If the window is open, I'm going to turn off heat and cool and just let the fan run, right? If I close the window, everything is resumed. On the screen in that little spot in the bottom, when you have a window sensor connected to it, it says window open and turns off that heat and cool. You also have the capability to network these guys, right? So how can you need to be able to measure what's going on, temperature value compared to the set point, and be able to make decisions upon that. So this is made as kind of a vendor agnostic type of device. BACnet MSTP, and then either Wi-Fi or Zigbee, and coming out of there goes BACnet IP to your supervisory device. So it doesn't matter if it's a Schneider AS, doesn't matter if it's a Johnson NAE, a Jenny, a Jace, a Train SC, whatever the case might be. They're all BACnet MSTP devices that are all on the BTL site. They're listed and tested. All the points are readable and writable, so you have complete command over all those things to be able to do whatever you want from your supervisory device to control these in any manner you want. These are also super flexible controllers, right? As I mentioned before, they're configurable devices. They've got an embedded sequence of operations in them. If you want, you can use the Lua programming to change the standard sequence of operations to fit your piece of equipment. So they're capable of being programmed, or you can use them as just standard configurable type devices. As I mentioned before, there's multiple protocols, or you can do a standalone type device. So you can use BACnet MSTP, which is built in, or Modbus. You can toggle between the two. You can have the Zigbee Pro wireless functionality built into it. So you can get one device that has the Zigbee radio on it, or you can get it without the Zigbee radio and put in add Zigbee communications to it. Or you can add Wi-Fi communications. So in the lower left-hand corner, there might be a Wi-Fi installation where I'm taking a standard Wi-Fi router. Wherever that casts out its signal, each one of the controllers can join that network, and then that goes BACnet IP to your supervisory device. In the center bottom portion here, we've got a Zigbee Pro wireless installation where you've got each one of the controllers cast out their bubble, and then there's a coordinator device which we provide, and each one of those guys communicate with that coordinator. Coming out of the coordinator is BACnet IP. That's a self-healing mesh network. So if one of the devices would go down for repairs, let's say, or maybe there's a problem, the controllers automatically find their path back to the coordinator, so you don't have to worry about setting up any sort of communication network. They all communicate because they're all on the same PAN and channel, so the communication is assured. Up in the top center portion of it is your standard BACnet MSTP or Modbus daisy chain type of environment, right? Again, these all have time clocks and schedules on them, so you can use them in a standalone environment. And then again, you can take and add the wireless sensors, either wired or wireless, right? So I can add wired sensors to these devices, or again, I can use the wireless Zigbee communications to communicate with up to 20 of those controllers. And again, it's very flexible in that you press and hold at the top part of the screen, and you go through your configuration parameters to configure the piece of equipment or the controller to fit your piece of equipment. And finally, what we like to think about these guys is the lowest installed cost, right? There's no programming tools for these, right? It's all done through the face of the controller. If you do choose to modify it with Lua script, then you would load a program into it, but you can still have control over that Lua program from the touchscreen interface. There's no software subscriptions or fees or licenses that you have to do. Modification tools are free, right? So that uploader tool is on our website for free. We write many of the programs, so if you have anything that's a little bit different from your standard operation, give us a call, give us an email, and we'll see if we can do something to be able to meet your requirements for those. Because there's no software tools, because there's nothing to program, typically a less skilled technician can actually interrogate these guys. So you don't have to put your best guy that does your chiller plants on a rooftop application. When you have the wireless communications, I'm eliminating that daisy chain, bus between each devices, so I'm using less labor. I'm using less materials, right? If I have to do a retrofit, say in a hotel, I don't have to come in with a lot of equipment to be able to run wire from room to room. If there's a situation where there's maybe asbestos in the walls, you don't have to go through that asbestos abatement. You can just put these controllers on the walls and use the wireless communication. And also you can get these from many different sources, right? So go to LinkSpring and you can get it, but let's say LinkSpring doesn't have any of these devices. It's available through the HVAC wholesale market, so available everywhere. I just want to show one picture here of maybe a way a fan coil would be wired up, right? So from the device itself, you can do the configurable inputs, either for windows or motion, dirty filter, door general service alarm, changeover sensor. It's got an input for remote space sensor. So let's say it's a retail establishment where they have the controller in the manager's office, but the actual temperature is being measured someplace else. That can be a wired or a wireless connection to it. It's got the supply air sensor already for it. It's got the fan, either can be low, medium, or high speed, or ECM motor. It's got an output for auxiliary heat, and then you configure for on-off, floating, or modulating outputs for that controller. Same thing for the line voltage type device, right? So you can have a relay pack there. That's where you bring in the line voltage, and then from that you wire to power the controller on the wall. Configurable binary inputs connect to it, and then all the supply air sensor, remote sensor, and outputs to your heating and cooling valve are there. And we'll do one more here, just a rooftop unit. Again, configurable inputs, remote space sensor, supply air sensor, outdoor air sensor, an input for airflow measuring station. You can have modulating gas heat, stage heat, cooling stage, fan, and then an output that follows occupancy. If it's occupied, it's open or closed, and you configure it that way. And again, any of these types of configurations can be modified with any sort of Lua programming that would be required to do unique situations. So that's the presentation on the controllers themselves. And I don't know if we have any questions or if I can help with anything else.
Thanks, Matt. Greatly appreciate it. Yeah. Again, it's amazing when you look at this whole thing from all angles, the number of options that are now available to us, the ability for low cost installation and so forth and so on. I have to say that you guys have come an extremely long way and definitely answering the challenges that are in the marketplace. So I got actually two questions here that have come through. So question one is, do you have a specification guide available or something to that effect?
Yeah, that's a good question. So on our website, when you go to viconics.com and then you hover your mouse over products, and then you come across the room comfort controllers, and it shows a picture of each one of the devices. You can click on that device. Within that area, you can see the model selections. If you need a specific model, it'll show you what features and functions. It also has the download section, which allows you to download things like the uploader tool, the latest firmware, things of that nature. But it also has a tab there for documentation. In the documentation tab, you'll see the wiring diagram, the installation sheets. You'll see the user interface guides that takes you through each one of the setup menu functions, right? So when you click on network, what are your choices and what does it mean when you choose BACnet or you choose Modbus and how to set that up? But it also has a specification guide section at the bottom, so that if you need verbiage to put in specifications or to meet them, that's there as well. So all the documentation is on our website. And if you have any questions about how to get to it or whatever, again, please feel free to reach out.
Gotcha. And the second question is from a person who says, I'm kind of new to the system integration contractor end of the business. I'm a little confused on when a commissioning tool is required and when it's not. So can you kind of just spend a few minutes talking about that, please?
Sure. So the controllers themselves were kind of meant to be something that you can take off the shelf, apply power, configure the device, and be off and running. So you don't need any sort of commissioning tools. You don't need any software. There's nothing to download unless you're going to obviously do a Lua program for them. So the commissioning pages are kind of built in with the test output screen and the service menu. When you go to the service menu, you can see what each one of the sensors are reading, see what each one of the outputs are doing, see what kind of firmware is in the device, where I am in my PI for my heat, and where I am for my PI for cool. And you'll be able to look at everything that's going on inside the controller. And then you have the test output screen where you can turn on the fans, you can turn on heat, turn on cool, turn them off, modulate the outdoor air damper open. So you've got control over all your outputs so that you can go through and verify, hey, it's operating correctly, I've got it wired correctly, and the functionality is there. So essentially the commissioning and all of the checkout tools are kind of built into the touchscreen interface. So you don't really require any sort of software offline. The only thing that you'd probably use is the software offline. If you get the uploader tool and you've got a bunch of controllers you want to configure in the same fashion. So you go through one unit and you say, all right, this is a rooftop unit. It's got 2 stages of cooling. It's got modulating heat. I'm using the economizer. You can save that configuration as a file, plug into the next device, and you don't have to go through the touchscreen setup. You can just say restore, and it configures that one exactly the way you configured the last one, so that you can be assured that you've got them all done in the same fashion.
That's great, thanks. With that, I don't see any other questions. So Matt, thank you to you and Viconics for being a longtime strategic partner with Linkspring. We appreciate the relationship and looking forward to many, many more years together. And for the folks out there, thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for more communication for future Linkspring Present webinars. And finally, a special thank you to all of our vets and those who are currently serving. Thank you. We appreciate your service and for keeping us safe. So with that, I will say goodbye, and we look forward to our next Link Spring Present. Have a great day.
Thank you.